time to time, perhaps because of one's spiritual practices, one feels a build-up of energy and a desire to express that energy in what are generally termed as good works. But good intentions can sometimes lead to apparently disastrous results. Can you give us some guidance on how to make the wisest use of this energy? And would you talk about the relationship between one's own level of awareness and the degree to which one can relieve the suffering of others?
Very good. Many people, and most people, have good intentions. Everyone here has good intentions. But the question is, what is behind the good intentions? What is the motivation for the works that one wants to do? I have come across people that would join various organizations and societies and do some wonderful work. But yet that wonderful work brings no spiritual gain whatsoever. Because the intention, the motivation is for self-aggrandizement. It is for self-ego fulfillment, with the idea of saying, oh, I did this and I did that. Whenever a good deed is done, and the very moment you think in your mind that I have done this, then that deed is valueless as far as your spiritual self is concerned. As far as spiritual unfoldment is concerned, it holds no value whatsoever. Because one works or does things for the sake of the work or for the sake of doing it and not for the reward. So many people with good intentions and doing good works want a reward. They want a reward so that they could have recognition that so-and-so did so-and-so. It has some limited value, but it does not have the real spiritual value that we are after. I do remember an instance where I was involved in building a community center, which comprises a temple, a school, and a hall. So this one person approached me, being the head of the organization, approached me and said, I would like to give £50,000 to the organization. And I says, very good, that's very generous and kind of you. But then he says, there's one condition. I want a plaque put up saying that so much was donated by so-and-so in memory of his mother and father. So I said, no, I'm very sorry. We don't need your £50,000. We are not here to boost your ego. The very little deed that you are doing, and he's a multimillionaire, so 50,000 means nothing to him. The very deed you are doing, you want to perpetuate the memory of your deed. So, for your sake, you are not being charitable. You are trying to buy a memory so that after you pass away, the memory will still linger. The people will say, Mr. So-and-so donated this and that. Well, same thing with everything else when it comes to good works. It has to be done for the sake of doing it, and not necessarily as a duty, because duty too has strings attached. That I have to do this duty, and you force yourself to do that duty. There should be no force and neither any compulsion in any act. It has to be a spontaneous giving, where you just do. And this is what the Gita tells you, that Your job is to do the work. And you are not entitled to the results thereof. So, with that idea in mind, when we do any kind of work, without any idea of any return, then that is the time the fullest return is given to you. It gives you a far greater awareness, a deeper insight into life. It gives you an insight into yourself, because that is an unfoldment. Now the person that could work for the sake of work, it is very easy to say that, but the person that can work for the sake of work is necessarily a highly integrated person. So, for example, teachers in our organization, I always tell them that when you teach, remember, you are being benefited more. And the analogy I love to use is this, that when you water the garden, the water cleans the host first, even before the water reaches the flowers. So you see the great benefits that one gains by this total dedication and unselfishness. Now, what do we mean by dedication? Dedication, in essence, contains a devotion. For devotion, if there is no devotion, there can be no dedication, and if there is no dedication, there is no commitment. Now, what are you committing yourself to, or what are you committed to? You are committed to yourself. And when you feel that you're committed to yourself, that you are responsible for yourself, that you are responsible for your own evolution, then all the actions that you perform would be spontaneous. So here the motivation, because no one in this mundane world could be entirely desireless. So have desire, but that desire should be towards self-unfoldment, which in turn means to become closer and closer to God or divinity. So that is a divine desire. And then, as one progresses on the spiritual path, even that desire disappears. Even that desire disappears. Because when you become one with divinity, then there is no question of desire anymore, for divinity is desireless. Divine will is a phrase so misunderstood. Divinity does not will anything. It is a common saying that thy will be done. Now, will in itself implies a thought process. Without thought, you cannot will. And that is more for the human mind rather than the divine mind. So, what do we mean by divine will? It means that within the laws of nature, things has to function in a certain way. It is the law of nature that water will run down a hill and not up the hill. It is the law of nature that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So it is the mechanism of the world's functioning. It is the mechanism of the laws of nature, which is will, which is divine will that was not created or premeditated, but it came about as a manifestation. Now, if you plant onions, you would not expect potatoes to grow. And yet if you think divine will is so powerful, what can be changed? You can plant potato seeds and onions will grow. Because we have given so much emphasis and power to divine will, a miraculous power, and yet divine will does not operate miraculously. That too is bound within the laws of nature, for what we understand as that supreme will is only the will of nature and not of God. For that divine essence is beyond all thought. It does not think. It is a neutral energy. And as I would always say, it is like electricity that could be used in a stove to produce heat or in a refrigerator to produce coldness. So, a man with good intentions, he would say, I am acting within supreme will, divine will. What he actually means, that I am acting according to the laws of nature, in accordance with the laws of nature and not against the laws of nature. That is divine will. Now, individual will comes in when man starts analyzing and weighing the pros and cons of the situation for the fulfillment and expansion of his own ego. That is individual. So, when we say, thy will be done, we surrender the I-ness that is within us, the me and the mine-ness that we have, that is obliterated, that is forgotten. We become oblivious to it and just flow with the laws of nature, and that is the supreme will. So here, good intentions can have no power whatsoever as long as it is based upon the needs of the ego. Once the needs of the ego and its bolstering up could be eradicated through spiritual practices, then those intentions, what started in our little minds, merge or manifest as the intentions of the Supreme Mind. And then only all our work bears fruit, beneficial fruit, sweet fruit, to benefit others. There was an old man who was planting mangoes. Now, mango trees take at least about 6-7 years to grow and bear fruit. So some youngsters were passing by, and they tell this old man, you are so old, you've got one foot in the grave, you're going to pass away. And then why do you plant these trees? Because by the time the tree grows and bears fruit, you will be dead. So he says, I'm not planting for myself. I'm planting for others to enjoy it. I'm just doing my work. I still have some strength in my body, and let me use it for the benefit of others. Now, that is good intention. That is good intention because it is not for his little self. It is not for self. It is selfless for the self of others. You see, that is good intention. So, you are going to do something for Auntie Matilda. She's not well, she's ill, so you go down and do the dishes and wash the clothes and this and that. And there are two reasons why you do that. And the one reason is this, that it is because your auntie and she is not well, so as a niece, you have to do that duty. You don't feel like doing it. You say, oh, what chore. You're doing it for the duty, but the observers from outside would say, oh, how wonderful little Mary is. She helps her auntie so much, yet she hates every moment of it. So that does not bear fruit. It does not bear any fruit. Fine. Another reason could be, let me look after Auntie Matilda, and I know she's got some of that. I'm sure if I look after her well, she will look after me. In the one instance, it is a total disgust. It becomes a chore, becomes a burden to do it. In the other instance, there is selfishness. And that could bear no fruit. So, outwardly, it might seem to be good intentions. To the observer, it might be so wonderful and good. Little Mary is so nice. But yet, it is totally fruitless. See? So like that, you have certain old ladies. They board sick at home. So they would help the church to stand on the corners with collection boxes or do other little things. Something good is done. Look, everything has some value, but we're coming down to the basics of it. So, why does she do that work? To relieve her boredom. That is selfish. If she did it with love, she'd be so occupied, and yet she says to herself that this is my love that I'm doing it for. Then it is of some value. You see? So, when we have good intentions within ourselves, we must analyze ourselves. We must use the power of discrimination. What the so-called good intentions, are they really good? How much interest have I in it? Personal interest. And if I do not have any personal interest, any selfish interest, then it is good. And you see how good intentions work. And then again, a person does something with good intentions and it backfires. It backfires because however the good intentions were, it has not been properly thought out. The consequences of the action has not been thought of, or perhaps the person is incapable of thinking what would happen if such and such an act was carried out. And the difference between one's level of awareness and how far one could reach, that should never be measured. That should never be measured. For life itself is an adventure. And on the path of the divine, it is still an adventure. The person that really succeeds in reaching divinity must be brave enough to leap into the unknown. Must be brave enough to leap into the unknown. For who really knows? Who really knows? Only the self-realized man knows God. And yet after knowing him, he cannot talk about him. He cannot tell you what it is. He can only infer what it could be to you. Because the finite mind has not the ability to describe in intellectual, logical terms what the infinite is all about. And we find this in daily life. If we eat sugar, who can define what sweetness is until you taste sugar yourself? You can talk of the chemical components in the sugar. You can talk about how sugar is refined, but nobody could ever describe the sweetness of sugar. Likewise, as our awareness increases, we'll be knowing more and more of what divinity is and what it is about. So, let us not think of the goal that is in the background of the mind, because it has to be in the background of the mind. The very laws of nature are pushing us to that goal. Let us think of our present awareness. How much aware am I? And as we do spiritual practices and our perspectives and attitudes change, we view things from a much wider angle. And these things we can see. As we climb up the hill, when we are at the bottom, we see a small section of that which is in front of us. And as we climb higher and higher, the view expands until we reach the top and we have the view of the entire city. So, we do not know what the entire city is going to look like when we reach the top of the hill, and neither should we worry about it. Because if we start thinking what is going to be the view from the top, then we are doing it with a preconceived idea. And how can one have a preconceived idea of that which is beyond conception? So in this adventure, we say we leap into the unknown, and as we climb higher and higher, we enjoy the vaster and vaster view that is in front of us. And realize the beauty, realize the joy of self-discovery. And so therefore, the path becomes joyous to the goal, which is joyousness itself. And once you reach the pinnacle, the top, you will find that the path and the goal is but one. For the path too is divine. Why we feel frustrated along the path? Why do we feel frustrated? Because we have not come to the realization that the path too is divine. For all is divine. The end is divine. The beginning is divine. And the path from the beginning to the end is also divine. And that is how, when we look around with that integrated view, nothing seems wrong. Everything is right. Everything is as it should be from the angle of divinity. The things we see wrong, we see because of preconceived ideas, things which we have been taught by our parents, by our educational systems, by our churches. Thou shalt do this and thou shalt not do this. And as we said in one of the talks this week, that it has some use, but a very limited use. Blessed is the man who can see no wrong in others. Blessed is that man, for his view will be at the divinity that is in man. Tattvamasi, that. And when he sees this, he is not concerned of the outer actions of the person. Lovers. Man loves his wife very much. She might have so many faults, but because of his love, he does not see those faults. But if there was no love in the man for his wife, the slightest little thing will irritate him. He will make a molehill into a mountain. So you see the power of perception and love, an indefinable quality, still has to be portrayed and expressed through perception. So the more aware a man becomes, the wider his perception, the wider his view. One of our meditators, in her meditation, had a vision. And she tells me, she says, Guruji, this vision I had, you were traveling with me in a car through the Alps, and I was so frightened of all these tall mountains, and how are we going to get through them all? The roads are narrow, and the roads are so steep. But then the vision changed, and we were in an aeroplane. And then I asked you, she says, well, what are those down there? And I say, those are the very Alps you saw. And that was what you were so frightened of. And here, they look so small, without fear. So, the angle of perception, from what height are you viewing a situation, depends upon you. And the result from the lower angle would be fear. From the higher angle or integrated angle, you have fearlessness. And where there is fearlessness, there is joyousness. Interesting. Life is terribly simple. Its simplicity could astound you, but we make it complex. So, with whatever tools we have in hand, we proceed through life, not thinking of the goal, but just doing what we have to do. If you have to walk somewhere which is 10 miles away, and you keep on thinking 10 miles, 10 miles, 10 miles, you will be tired. You even before you reach there. But if you only think of the steps you are taking, you will reach the 10 miles distance without feeling tired. So everything depends on thought processes. Now, how can thoughts be molded? How can thoughts be molded so that we do not suffer as we do? And there is only one way, and that is spiritual practices. Whereby automatically the thoughts don't bother us. We become observers. I was giving an example to someone with whom I had a consultation. This young lady says, the thoughts keep on bothering me. It whirls and whirls and whirls in my mind. What must I do? And I say, the more you fight against them, the stronger they become. Try and observe those thoughts. Think that you are sitting in a cinema and you are watching the screen. There's nothing you can do to alter what's happening on the screen. In the same way, let the thoughts pass in front of your mind and watch them. And by watching them, they fade away. Because here you are becoming a witness. A witness to the happenings in the mind. And who is the witness to the happenings of the mind? Is the higher self within you. So here, very automatically and spontaneously, you are now functioning and are aware of the spiritual self that is there within you, the real doer, the real observer, the real essence. And then you regard all the movements of thought as a play. I had some fun with Charles at his home in Liverpool. He loves to smoke his Churchillian cigars, things like that. Now, where he had a little device which you turn and it bores a hole in the cigar. Fine. So I was looking at it, I was intrigued, and I started fiddling around. So I started fiddling around with this little thing. Now, it has a drill type of effect. Now, as you turn it, you find the spiral is going up and up and up. Continuous spiral. And then I showed Charles. I said, do you see the movement of the spiral? He says, yes. But do you notice something else? That in spite of the movement you observe, the whole thing is standing still. So there is that stillness within all and within everything. For this very movement of your mind and everything else has its basis upon that stillness. So the spiraling movement is a superimposition. A superimposition upon that stillness. So now, when we start observing the thought processes, we will see its movement, but yet becoming the observer, Sakshibhava, becoming the observer, you do not feel the power of that movement. You are unshaken. You stand still. And nothing affects you. In praise, you are still in tranquility. Even in blame, you are still in tranquility. So, the basis of good intentions, the basis of the various gradations of our awareness, wide or narrow, it is all still based upon the eternal stillness. All the turbulent waves of the ocean are based upon the calm that is deep down in the ocean. You see, depends on attitude, depends how we treat things, depends how we treat people. That rebounds on us. Here, in the dining hall, I don't know if it was one of our meditators or from a meditator from the other group here, but while sitting down to dine, took the napkin and pressed it in his collar, like the Italians when they eat spaghetti. Huh? Right. So the manager saw this, and the managers thought that this is not allowed here, this is not Italy, this is England, you know. You don't do that, you put the napkin on your lap, on the side or whatever. So he calls his assistant manager. He says, look, these people are very good customers of ours. You know, they come here twice a year, all the time, and they must be looked after. Now, this does not look nice, and that man must remove that napkin from his neck. But you must be very tactful not to hurt his feelings. So the assistant manager here is a clever fellow. So he went up. So he went up to this person and says, sir, what would you like? Shave or haircut? So it is our relationships, how we treat people, and the intention should always be such that we don't hurt anyone by word or deed. Like this young fellow saying the prayer, Lord, give us this day our daily bread. So a friend of his comes along. He says, so much effort praying every day for daily bread. Why didn't you pray for a week's supply? Why didn't you pray for a week's supply? So this fellow replies that if I pray for daily bread, then I'm assured I will get it fresh. You see, there's motivation. Even in the prayer, there's motivation. He's not satisfied getting the bread from the Lord, but yet he wants it fresh also. Motivation. And yet so many things happen in the name of religion. Are we still having that concert tonight? You see, motivation is so important. And in the name of religion, so many things happen in the name of theology. There was this Bishop of London. And he, walking in one of those busy streets of London, a little urchin bumped into him. And of course, the Bishop of London berated him, scolded him. Can't you see where you're going, type of thing. So this little urchin says, you are going to hell at 6:30. Yes. So, and then the urchin ran away. So this Bishop of London started chasing him. But this boy pot-bellied bishops are always pot-bellied. So as he was chasing this little urchin and turned the corner, he happened to meet the Bishop of Oxford. So the Bishop of Oxford asks the Bishop of London, he says, where are you rushing around? You know? He says, I met this little urchin, and he says, I'm going to hell at 6:30. So the Bishop of Oxford says, don't be in such a hurry, you still got an hour. Well, one thing is sure, we should never put our noses, in other people's business. So this one fellow was told, he says, people have a habit of putting their noses in my business. So his friend says, yes. But this fellow says, I don't mind because I'm a handkerchief manufacturer. I think we have a night ahead of us. There is the concert, and after that I was told that there is a sort of a party or something. So I'll cut it short today until tomorrow morning. I'll still give the supper to you. My niece must be on.